pretty much any industry. Make your client, make your guest, make your customer feel special. Build a meaningful relationship with them, and that goes so far in building brand loyalty.
In this episode of Wisdom, Wealth, and Wellness, host Jonathan Satovsky interviews hospitality visionary Tommy Tardie, creator of New York's Flatiron Room. They discuss Tommy's journey from advertising to crafting soulful, timeless venues that foster genuine connection and community that lead to wellness.
Welcome to Wisdom, Wealth, and Wellness, our podcast. I'm Jonathan Satovsky, and today I am so honored to be joined by my friend Tommy Tardie, the visionary behind the New York's most soulful spaces, including Flatiron Room and what was formerly known as the Fine and Rare. Grateful to know Tommy. I've been looking forward to this because I think you occupy a unique intersection. You've spent years on Madison Avenue, mastering the art of grabbing attention, but you've transitioned into the high-stakes world of hospitality to master the art of holding spaces. That's how I think about it. Anyway, in our world, what I have found in our ethical systems and long-term impact, we often talk about building things that last. And, you've managed to engineer such soul into your spaces that feel like they've been around for a century. The attention to detail and aesthetic is brilliant. I just wanted to spend our time today exploring how you curate connection, the wisdom behind the third place, and what a well-poured dram can teach us about a well-lived life. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the very kind words. It's hard to believe. We opened up the original Flatiron Room in 2012, and it's been a heck of a journey. But hearing you say what you just said, it's very gratifying because it's something that we do focus a lot on. I think in our space, you really have to look outside of just food and beverage. We're in New York City, arguably one of the most competitive places in the world to open up a restaurant. So, we learned not so early. We could have learned earlier, but it's as much as your food and beverage has to be good, it goes well beyond that. There's too many great restaurants out there that also have good food. So we really focus more on the connections and the entire guest journey. And what we've found is that the entire guest journey is really what creates that experience for people.
So I have this unlearning question. You started your career in the world of advertising. Where success is measured by, clicks and expressions and impressions. And, when you opened originally the Flatiron Room, what did you have to unlearn about human behavior to create a space where people actually want to slow down and stay versus just click, 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 click?
Well, it's interesting when I look at my original business plan, we're opening up a place in Miami, and I was referencing it just as kind of a reference. And, some of the things that I put in that plan was, what we wanted to be and what we didn't want to be. And I think it was more of an exercise in learning myself versus what we were trying to project to investors. And some of the things that I put was, we wanted to be timeless. We didn't want to be like a flash in the pan. We didn't want to be that shiny new object. We really wanted to focus on consumers and the overall experience. And I guess the biggest difference when I was working on Madison Avenue, the data we would get would take sometimes, up to a year before we actually got really good data to see if something was successful. And what's great, I think one of the biggest joys in this industry is being able to get that instant gratification or instant feedback. When we launch something, whether it be a food dish or a a wow moment or a cocktail, that same night we'll have a pretty good gauge of how people perceive it. And it's great. And we could stand across the room and just watch that interaction with this new item. And anybody in the industry is going to know what triggers are. You can all just imagine when someone tastes something, you don't need words to just kind of look at their face and see if they enjoy it or not. So that was a really a nice change from my previous career.
Well, I could say I've been a beneficiary of many fine meals,
Mm,
excellent music. You curated amazing artists that come and
mm,
create this soulful space.
mhm,
And I've actually also been a beneficiary of witnessing the intensity of the training you do with your team on the unique spirits, the unique um, um, origin stories of each of the liquors that
mhm.
are being served so that they can transmit that story to the end consumer, going back to the consumer experience. I'm just curious what inspired you in that whole. I mean, you've had a really tight grip on the details from the walls to the artist to the food to the concierge experience that's being delivered. I give you great kudos and compliment for that.
Thank you. Thank you. So, interesting story. When I first opened up the Flatiron Room back in 2012, we knew I knew what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a little bit of everything, and I think I was kind of pulling from like the old supper club vibe, a little bit of the Plaza Hotel when the Oak Room and the Rose Room were still around. And I really, I like that. And I also, I'd spent some time in Japan when I was younger. And I remember going to an area in Japan called Roppongi, which is a nightclub district. And they had something which I thought was fascinating. You could store liquor bottles there. And, at the time I think I was a junior art director. But I must have tucked it away in long-term memory, and I just thought it was such a cool device to kind of engage customers and convert them into potentially, a long-term user or a very much a brand loyal user. So we incorporated that into our kind of the architecture, and if you've been to our venues, you see the bottles everywhere. And it's such a great device to get those customers and turn them into repeat users. In terms of knowledge, I built something that I built something bigger than I thought. When we started bringing in this extensive spirits collection, I realized I really knew nothing about it. I went in and in my circle of friends, I probably knew the most about spirits, but, frankly, my friends didn't know much. So I was, I was the token president of that club.
Yeah.
But then entering the industry, a lot of people came up. They just had an overwhelming amount of knowledge, and they were hitting me with questions that I just couldn't answer. So I took it upon myself to just take a deep dive into learning more about it, and traveling to different distilleries and getting a better understanding of it. And I found that really, if I could educate my staff in that. Um, Translating some of these stories to customers when they're purchasing something, whether it be food or beverage, seems to make the item taste a little bit better. If there's a backstory behind it, people appreciate it more. And part of our job in hospitality is very much storytelling. It's telling people about what the concept was, where it came from, and what our feeling was when we created it.
All it seems like all of life is storytelling, and I think actually one of the first times stepping into your facility on 37th between Fifth and Madison,
Mm.
um, you've taken real great attention to detail on the rooms.
Yeah.
as if you've always been there, beyond the decor.
Yeah.
There's a certain energy or an invisible system you put in place that ensures the guest feels like, they're coming home, or, even if it's their first visit, it transports you from the hustle and bustle. You open the doors and you come in, and the vibe you
Oh,
did an exceptional job there. And I think the curation with that is equally as impactful to the entire experience. So
thank you.
sorry.
That's good to hear, because that's really what we wanted. My background was a creative director, so the attention to detail just came naturally to me. But something that I found, which is pretty interesting, is not everybody is going to be able to identify those triggers that makes a good experience versus a bad experience in terms of aesthetics, but most people will feel it, but they just can't really communicate what it was that made it so good. And oftentimes it's the small things, Jonathan. It's like, it's the lighting being the right levels, the music being the right levels, attention to detail when it comes to the table, but not too much attention, because then it's overwhelming. It's these little subtleties that really make or break it. And again, most people don't know it. Like, they'll walk out, and if someone were to ask them, like, "Oh, how was your experience in there?" Sometimes the answer will be like, "Oh, it was just okay." And if they ask, like, "Well, how was the food?" "Oh, the food was great." "How was the service?" "Oh, the service was great, but it was just okay." Like, why is that? And again, a lot of people can't articulate it, but it's this kind of underlying feeling of when you're there. And again, it's that's something that we spend a lot of time in. Like, we obsess over the details because we know it does matter.
I want to go back to your talk about the bottles, creating a stakeholder for life. I'm in
Yeah.
the wealth management field, and you're trying to get people to think
Mm.
about multi-generational work, beyond the news of today or tomorrow, just the short-term thinking. And I'm curious, that experience that you were talking about, the Bottle Keep program, what has been your reaction from your stakeholders, the people that have brought in? I know um, full disclosure, I'm a beneficiary. One of my employees walked by and was like, "Oh, we got to get a locker here." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "I don't drink, but
Yeah.
okay, we're getting a locker."
Yeah. Yeah. Overwhelming, overwhelming. I think as an entrepreneur, there's you got to take leaps of faith without knowing the outcome. It's just part of what you do. And I had this vision in my mind of first of all, I think the bottles look beautiful when they're uplit. And, if we had this massive inventory and you're working in a place like Manhattan where space is such a commodity, like, how about, why not incorporate it into the architecture? So, I had the vision, and we built the millwork to house like over 1,000 bottles. And, you know, I, and I think it was like a week before we opened that I realized, in my mind, I pictured it was like burned in my mind of all the lockers being filled with the tags on it. And it was beautiful. And it was like a week before we opened that I was like, oh no, we're going to open, and we haven't sold any. So it's just going to be this big vacant space, this big cavity. And it was just like a real splash of cold water in my face. So I got a little anxious, and I said, what if this doesn't work? This is a huge, again, this big cavity that's always going to be haunting me. If we don't fill it up, what are we going to do? So, for starters, we got a bunch of dummy bottles and we put it in. But then the first night we opened, I think we sold like 3 bottles, and I was so ecstatic. And then, over the course of like a year and a half, I just watched every day new bottles go in there. And so I was extremely happy for that. And I figured it was going to go one of two ways. It would be like people would buy it, and they would deplete their bottle, and then they'd be like, well, that was fun. And then they just wouldn't do it again. Or the other option, which happened to be the option that people took, is we had very, very high retention. So we found that people would deplete a bottle and then quickly renew it with another bottle. But even more than that, which I thought was really fascinating, is people would buy one bottle, and then even before they finished it, they would buy another one, and sometimes another one. So much so that we have customers at our original location that have like over 30 bottles that they have. And when I look at the
Wow.
bottles, and these people are not raging drinkers. They like the social aspect of it, and they it's fun because when they come and they have dinner, they'll bring all their bottles out. So they almost host their guests. Like, they have bottles at their tables, and they kind of walk their guests through different spirits while they're having dinner. So I was really happy to have that. Frankly, I wish I had the foresight to have that as a goal, but it really wasn't. It was just something that came about. And as a result, in our new venue, the one that I'm in right now on 37th Street, we said, well, we want to cater to those people that maybe want to purchase more than one bottle. So then we developed these lockers where people can purchase, like you have, Jonathan. People can purchase an entire locker and they can store all their bottles in it. And it was a huge, huge hit. So now it's kind of one of our brand pillars. There's other people that do it. I think we do it very, very well. But we've also been doing it for, almost 14 years now. So we've got a good system down.
That's awesome. So now I'm gonna challenge you to go back to your advertising days, because I don't think all of our the people that have tuned in to this podcast, fortunately, come from a very wide walk of life. They're not all from the hospitality world. So, but I do like the idea of that deeper angle of shared ownership. Of building an ecosystem, building a community. Um, you know, I know when a guest has a bottle with their name on it, they aren't just a customer, they're a stakeholder.
Mhm.
So how can other leaders apply this concept to whatever their own communities and ecosystem are? Because everyone doesn't have that same bottle, but what would be a good parallel for wide range of industries? What does your ad experience think about? Well, think
Yeah.
about wealth management. How do you keep people? I have a fintech and a wealth management business here. I'm turning the tables and trying to extract some of your deep wisdom to make sure that I'm doing my part to build a community, because I'm not giving everyone bottles. Plus, I don't want
Yeah.
everyone drinking. I'm trying to keep them healthy.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just
there's
teasing about the drinking thing. Of course, I'm going to have them come drink at your place.
we have some good mocktails. We have some really, really good mocktails, which seem to be on the trend right now. So we're okay with non-drinkers. So, I'll answer your question with a quote that I really love. The famous restaurateur, chef, hospitality aficionado, James Beard. I'm sure some of your guests know who he is. If not, Google him. He passed away, but he's a huge, huge guy in the culinary scene. And people would corner him all the time and say, James, what's your favorite restaurant? What's your favorite restaurant? And he would famously say, oh, my favorite restaurant is the same as yours. A little bit of a dramatic pause. And then he would follow up and say, it's the one that makes me feel the most special. And that really said a lot to me, because he didn't mention the food. He didn't mention the beverages. He didn't mention cocktails or the wine program. He mentioned making whichever one made him feel the most special. And that's a universal term. And I think it can apply to pretty much any industry. Make your client, make your guest, make your customer feel special. Build a meaningful relationship with them. And that goes so far in building brand loyalty. I can tell you, in my experience, I like familiarity. I think there's so much kind of turbulence in my world, my business world, that familiarity is good. And some of the vendors that I use, I've used for over a decade. And people will call all the time, like my insurance broker. People will call all the time. They'll be like, Tommy, I'm sure I can get you a better rate. And I said, you probably can, but I'm happy with who I have, and I'm willing to spend a premium on that because I have that connection with them. And I
That's
think
great.
that's true to any industry.
That's
If you
great.
have something that's good, stick with it.
That's great. Yeah, I've been lucky. It's actually a consultant once told me that I wasn't very smart. I said, "Why is that?" They said, "Well," I said, "I'm proud I have 98% retention with first, second, third, and fourth generation family members." They said, "Well, that's silly." I said, "Why is that silly?" They said, "Well, you should have 10 to 15% turnover because you should be, you're bending too much for people." I said, "What are you talking about? I'm trying to provide an experience I'd want as a consumer on the other end. You're out of your mind."
Hmm.
Obviously, I didn't stick to that consultant very long, but
Yeah.
nonetheless. Okay, so let's go in a different direction. Let's talk about wellness. I actually there's an article in the the Wall Street Journal many years ago about the restorative power of a social meal. Having a good meal and spending time with friends
Mhm.
is one of the most euphoric things. Having a good meal is euphoric. Spending time with friends, you
Yep.
merge them together. It's one of the top attributes of a life well lived.
Yep.
So the idea is that wellness um, isn't just about what you don't eat. It's about who you eat with.
Mm.
So I think, Tommy, your focus being on music, particularly jazz specifically, and there's something soulful there too, which is a lot to unpack. And shared spirits act as like nervous system regulators, is how I was thinking about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the question I would have for you is like, we often talk about wellness in terms of isolation, diets, meditation, but you really, I think, an unspoken thing about what you're doing is you're creating community wellness.
Mm.
And I'm curious if you've ever given any thought to the intentionality behind that and or what you've seen from the psychological effect of a room filled with live jazz, shared meals. You could see the energy shift in
Mm.
people sitting at the tables.
Yeah. It's an interesting angle. And we've thought about it. I don't know if we've gone as deep as what you just said, but I really like where you're going with that. Um, you know, a lot of people will approach me in any restaurateur, and they'll say things like, "Oh, I want to create a restaurant. My husband's a good bartender. I'm a great chef, and as much as those things are important, there's such a bigger picture of hospitality outside of just food and beverage, and it comes down to creating atmosphere in a room, and creating and having that critical mass, and that balance of people, um, to create a room that feels, everybody has felt it. Again, certain people can better put their finger on it, but walking into a room and there's a vibe, there's a certain vibe that you get, sometimes good and sometimes bad. And there's a lot of, we're always trying to create the right vibe with lighting, with sound, with presentation, with service, with touch points. Um, the live music is a big part of it for us because it gives it, like, we never position ourselves as a live music venue. We always position it more as our live music is background, and it's meant to enhance guest experience. And that's critical. We're not like a come in, have 2 drinks, charge a cover charge, nothing like that. Like, the background's complimentary. It's there to enhance the experience, not be the experience. And it adds a lot of keeping people relaxed and lowering people's guards. It's funny, especially with like a new group that's coming in, and maybe if there's people that don't know each other very well, for some reason the live music just kind of it kind of is like a wingman almost. It's you're if the conversation slows down, there's the music to reflect on, and you can kind of engage with the music a bit. So yeah, room dynamics is super important. I think the wellness aspect of it is very interesting. We hope that, I think we've been in the business long enough to realize that when people go out, they're not necessarily going out to eat. sure, they're eating, but it's something bigger. They're getting together with friends. They're looking for a social atmosphere. And they want to feel good. They're catching up with people.
So
So,
just building on that, I'm just curious, like, I know this is maybe outside of your scope, but I just anecdotally going back to this is just my own thesis on this.
yeah.
Why do you think the social engagement around that table perhaps is the most overlooked form of modern medicine in modern society? Meaning, I know I've witnessed it in your facilities, and I'm curious if you've picked this up. The energy and the demeanor of someone walking in off the street, the hustle and bustle of New York, walking through those doors, walking through the velvet ropes, so to speak, or the velvet cloth or curtains, and then them sitting down, hearing the music, getting, nice glass poured. I mean, it's infectious. I'm just curious, if you've witnessed that, and whether you're pick that up, as a
Yeah. Yes. Uh, a term that I hear a lot is the term transportive. People will say it's, your venues are very transportive. Like stepping inside, I feel like I'm just in a different time, and I'm in a different city. I'm in a different country. They walk through the doors and they feel like it's escapism. And I love that. Our intention when we designed it was, going back to what you said, earlier. You said something to the effect of feel like we had been there forever. When I worked with my design team, they said something that was really, really kind of stuck with me for a long time. And I said, I wanted something authentic. When you walked in, I didn't want it to feel, again, like that shiny new object. And they said the best way to create authenticity, which is a term I used a lot, was to use authentic items. And I had him elaborate a little bit more on that. And it was really, diving into unique items that you're not going to find anywhere else. And Jonathan, I'm sure I've showed you at least some of these, but everything from our floorboards, we sourced from an old mill that was, 200 years old. The floorboards are really old. The ceiling panels came from an old distillery. Our co-check entry area and some of our host stand entry area, they were the original windows from Grand Central Station. We have all these unique artifacts from all over the world, and it just creates that kind of transportive element, almost like an old explorers club.
It's awesome. On a deeper angle, I want to focus on the music as the pulse.
Yep.
I think you describe live music as a theatrical element.
Yep.
And how you choose the vibration of the music dictate the pace of the meal.
Yep.
Allowing people to slow down, digest, actually see the person across from them. So I just wanted to hear your thought on the power of music and how you curate you've done a great job of curating the guests that come in with a certain vibe. And I just love to hear your philosophy or take on that.
Sure. It was definitely there was definitely a learning curve. I knew I wanted that theatrical element in the room. I thought it was important, and I also liked the vibe that created. And when we started it, back in the day, it's like 2012, there was so few venues that had live music. I mean, the ones that did were listening rooms and these places that you would pay a cover to, like Blue Note and all these great venues. Not many restaurants had it. I don't even remember how many at the time, but I probably could count them on 3 or 4 fingers. So our goal was to have something that was background that would allow for conversation to still happen versus have to be muted once the band came on. But frankly, I didn't know much about that space. And we had to find musicians that were frankly okay with having guests talk when they were playing, because a lot of people thought it was disrespectful. And they would say, well, these bands are playing, you should really be quiet. And, we just kind of embraced the opposite. And we said, look, we want them to enjoy the music, but we also want them to enjoy their time with their guests. So, over, I say the first 2 to 3 years, it was finding bands that kind of ticked off all our boxes. And those boxes were, number one, they had to sound good. They had to look good because they were front and center. And they also had to be kind of understanding of what our goal was. Certain bands were like, they didn't want to play if people were going to be talking when they played. But, now because we've been doing it for so long and both venues have it, we have a real solid list of bands that we use on a regular basis. So, sometimes they'll take a break and we'll say, okay, we're going to sit you for a while, or maybe we'll move them to another location. But now we just kind of circle with, we kind of rotate the people that we've been using over the years. But it was definitely a learning curve. Not an easy one for someone that knows nothing about music other than what I like.
I wouldn't quite say that, but you've been a great curator of experience for me and many, many, many guests. And I look forward to visiting. I now am myself planning on opening an office in South Florida, so maybe I'll have an opportunity to come check out your Miami spot.
Amazing.
But Tommy, this has been a true masterclass in the stewardship of moments, is what I would describe it. So I thank you, for reminding us that when we're pouring a glass of whiskey or building a business, that real wealth seems to lie in the quality of the connections and the durabilities of these little small rituals and the authenticity that you bring into each moment, human moments. And that gap is something to celebrate. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and creating this third places that remind us how to be human together,
My pleasure.
To our listeners, thank you for spending your most valuable asset, your time, with us today. If this conversation resonates with you, I invite you to join our community as we continue to explore the intersection of wisdom, wealth, and wellness. And you can subscribe to your podcast on your favorite platform. Visit us at Wisdom, Wealth, and Wellness. And to find more resources on Satovsky.com to learn about building a life of integrity, joy, multi-generational impact. Until next time, seek balance, prioritize character, and remember that the best investments are the ones that compound in the soul. I'm Jonathan Satovsky. We'll see you in the next episode. And please visit Tommy Tardie at the Flatiron Room in Gramercy, in 37th Street, in Miami. Is there other locations we got?
That's it for now.
That's it for now. There's others on the docket. Just give it time. Have a great day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jonathan.
At Satovsky Asset Management, we believe refined wealth deserves refined service. As fiduciaries, our mission is to protect and grow your wealth through disciplined advice, hyper-personal service, and multi-generational trust. Our clients stay because we don't oversell. We simply over-deliver.